My first promise is that I won't be doing any energizers with you, okay? So that's actually a positive sign. My name's Steve Griffiths. I work in the London office. My remit is to cover all of EMEA, and my focus is around mobile. And I cover sites and apps, and I help companies either identify new products and services that they could help their businesses grow. I help them improve the performance of their existing products and services, and that includes both sites and apps. And today I'm going to talk to you specifically around sites. And this is our focus today. 3 things. First of all, user experience, and why as businesses need to become more customer obsessed. That includes us at Google as well. Secondly, I'm going to talk about site design. So what are the different approaches or paths you could take to design and develop sites? And I'm going to give you some user experience examples. So I'm going to give you some what we call exemplars or best practices. And the reason we need to improve the performance of sites is to improve the user experience for customers that will then drive conversion. And thirdly, site trajectory. So where are sites going next? Well, the bigger question, where's the web going next? And what are we doing at Google? And the importance of understanding where things are going next and really thinking about that is thinking about how we need to reconfigure our propositions to exploit these new capabilities. So those are three things. And first of all, user experience. So a kind of question for you as consumers, do we prefer products or sites that are useless, hard to use and frustrating? Or B, useful, easy to use and satisfying? Hopefully it's B. That should be the answer. It's the question I ask when we're talking about mobile apps as well. A fairly simple question, simple answer, but you'd be amazed at the amount of clients I talk to, global brands all over the world, who give you A and not B. And that's primarily because they don't really understand their customers, because they work in a silo, and business would be really, really easy if we didn't have to engage customers. But unfortunately, we do. So designing experiences. So what does the site look like? How does it feel? And how does it work? So a couple of quotes. First of all, from Steve Jobs. So the second quote from Steve today. So he's dead, but he's actually alive and well. So most people make the mistake of thinking design is what it looks like. It's not. It's actually how it works. So if you think about, your brand as an aggregation of all the interactions a customer has with you on your site, on your apps, through telephony, through your retail stores, it's an aggregation of that, and that's how something actually works. And then Mary Meeker, who was a famous analyst, worked for Morgan Stanley, used to publish an annual report everyone looked forward to each year. Now she works at Kleiner Perkins, which is a famous Silicon Valley VC, and she says the reimagination of nearly every product is powered by new devices and connectivity, that much we know, but also user interface and beauty. So the combination of function plus form, very, very important. It's just more than just how things look. So one of the principles we use on the Android design side internally is that we figure that if we give somebody a negative experience when they're using an Android product, we have to give them 3 positive experiences to counteract that, to balance that. Which says it's really important to fix pain points the customers have with our propositions, because we quickly run out of positive experiences to counteract the negative ones on a 3-to-1 ratio. Okay, so what can we do? So I take most of my customers through this, and I say, what is your customer life cycle? This is one we use as an abstract life cycle if you don't have one, if you're not familiar with it, which is see, think, do, care. Now, if you think about your customer as they start going through that life cycle, they'll have positive experiences and negative experiences, depending on where they are in the life cycle and what their intent is, what they're trying to achieve. And the experience might look something like this. And this is what it looked like when I was doing interim management for a global car hire firm. And we're plotting out what the experience was when you're trying to hire a car. So at the start, they have a good experience because they get the inspiration of choosing where they'd like to hire a car, all the fantastic destinations around the world. They get to think about all the fantastic cars they could hire. And then they come to the site or the app. It's not such a great experience. Functionally, it's a poor online experience, the actual booking, because you've got to choose destination, dates, months, cars, accessories, insurance. It's a pretty horrid experience. And then they turn up and they go to the station. And when they get to the station, their happy experience has turned into, we're giving you an upgrade. You booked a BMW, we're now giving you a Volkswagen. And as of this week, nobody's going to book a Volkswagen, right? So it's not really an upgrade. And you go down and they show you the car and they give you the keys and they say, off you go. And you're thinking, I've never driven this car before. You're not giving me any guidance at all. So they've got huge stretch. So they have multiple good experiences, multiple painful experiences, And it's really important to map these out, because in car hire, the good experiences, destination, driving, they're associated with the car. Whereas the negative experiences, turning up at the station, using your website, those are all associated with a car hire company. It's very important. So as you know, what's important is to map out all those pain points your customers experience. And you're not going to really know these unless you gauge your customers. It could be through site stats, CSAT, Net Promoter Scores, focus groups, or just talking to customers. And those moments are things you need to fix, so they're opportunities. And then what are the enjoyable moments? How enjoyable are they? Moderately or excessively? And those enjoyable moments are opportunities. They're new unmet needs you could potentially exploit. But it's really important to focus on what is the whole customer lifecycle, and whether they start on a site and then go to the app, lunchtime, and then evening go to a desktop, and back onto the phone, and then call telephony. All those points need to be understood. And this is why we need to become customer obsessed. So that's a very kind of high-level view of what we need to achieve. So now looking a bit more granular, so site design and some UX examples. So one of the kind of painful realities that we face today is that we've got an increasing set of platforms, not just devices, but device types, platforms. So we have desktop, tablet, smartphone, we have smartwatch, we have wearables, we have smart TVs, we have auto, and we've got a fragmenting set of platforms to cater for. We have a fragmented set of devices within each platform. So if you look at smartphones, you have small phones, you have big phones, you have phablets. It's hard to know where they kind of start and stop. So fragmenting platforms, fragmenting device types within platforms, and then fragmenting screens. So screens, orientation, landscape portrait, screen sizes, screen resolutions. You've got multiple inputs. So you've got mouse, keyboard, touch, voice, gesture, and then finally postures. So how people actually use a phone. Is it one-handed? Is it two-handed? What's within their natural thumb zone before they have to use a second hand? All these are fragmentation problems. It's all increasing complexity. And these things will only get worse and worse. So it's something that we have to embrace. So when we're talking about fragmenting platforms, we have to think about what are the main platforms that our use case needs. What do we need to support? Maybe it's only one. But we also need to consider what are the emerging platforms for our use case. On devices, responsive design, which is where you can build a single site that responds to the device that's accessing it and the screen size that's accessing it, is the only flexible and sustainable approach to building sites to cater to these or satisfy these complexities. And then screens. We need adaptive grids and layouts to, again, reflect those complexities. With inputs, we need to satisfy or service the maximum amount of inputs we can, because we don't know how people are going to be using our products. But we need to optimize for touch, because mobile will probably be the first place they start in most customer journeys. And then postures. What is the natural thumb zone for a smartphone? And when do they need to go to two-handed? And that reflects where your key functionality, your call to action should be, and your main navigation. And really, you need to embrace all these fragmentation issues and these complexities so you can design for them. And design is essentially a solution to a problem. And be mobile first. So somebody mentioned mobile first earlier on. It needs to be all device first. The reason we need to be mobile first is because of the constraints that mobile forces upon you. You've got 75% less real estate than a desktop site, which forces you as a business to prioritize what's important and what isn't. And that's a really difficult decision. So what is your primary user journey? And if it's secondary, you move it off screen, off canvas. You put it into a menu on the side, below, above, or you remove it altogether from mobile. And you progressively enhance from there as you scale up different device types. So it forces the business to make really difficult decisions, which is a cleansing process to go through. So the painful new reality is designing cross-screen and cross-device user experiences. That's just something we have to face today, which necessitates a flexible, sustainable approach to user experience. That's a necessity. And there are 3 design paths to consider. Now, you're probably familiar with all of these. So the first path is building a dedicated site. So we've all got dedicated mobile sites or desktop sites. Some of us have now dedicated mobile sites. which means you're building multiple sites, which is a problem. So the benefit of going dedicated is you can build an ideal experience for a smartphone with a mobile site. You can build an ideal experience for a desktop with a desktop site. There are very few dependencies, so you're not dependent on any other site that you already have. So you can get on and do it quickly. And the initial effort and cost will probably be lower than any other design approaches. So it's ideal, but it's unsustainable based on the complexities and fragmentation I've just talked about. An example would be eBay. They decided we've got a fantastic desktop experience, but the mobile experience is significantly different, that we do need a dedicated mobile site design because it's different use case and different context. But they have the capabilities and resources to fulfill multiple site designs and builds. Secondly, we've got responsive. So some of you will have responsive sites and be familiar with the challenges of going responsive. It's essentially where you build a single site that responds to the browser. The browser detects what device is using it, and it gives you the right site for that. And it uses fluid grids and images. It uses one code base, so it's better than having multiple code bases and multiple sites. One URL, but you can have issues around things like image bloat, so your images are too large. But you can also use responsive images to get around that. You have much higher text testing issues because you've got to test multiple devices across one site and make sure whenever you're optimizing or bug fixing and making changes, you've got to test and cascade across all devices. But it's the only sustainable approach. So I think it's the approach that we should really go for in today's age. Here's an example, the BBC. Now, some people say, well, it's much easier to go responsive if your proposition is based around content, if you're a publisher. You don't have, the functional issues or checkout flow complexities that e-commerce sites do. But then a few weeks ago, Apple went responsive. So Apple going responsive is a pretty big move in, design approach debate. But we have lots of e-commerce retail brands, large brands, large customers who've all gone responsive and benefited from it. But there is a kind of halfway house where people like Huffington Post said, we want to go responsive. We know that it's where we need to get to because it's the only flexible, sustainable approach for our brand in today's environment of high complexity. So they said, we're going to build a mobile site, but we're going to build it responsively so it responds gracefully to all the different types of smartphones accessing it. And when the conversion rate improves across those smartphones, we'll then scale up to tablet, scale up to desktop. So it's a way to do it incrementally. So there is a way to step change. And a third way is adaptive. And adaptive is basically a combination of the two. It's a responsive site in that you're building one site, but you go adaptive if you have very different user experiences and use cases for different devices. So to give you an example of car hire again, on a desktop site, people want inspiration, and they want to discover all the destinations, all the cars they can use. So it's a lot of content. When you go to smartphone, it's a very functional, very utilitarian experience. They're just doing the booking. So that difference in context, different use case was significant enough for the car hire companies. We're going to say we're going to go adaptive. So we're going to build a single responsive site, but we're going to have specific breakpoints. So when a smartphone is requesting that site, we're going to send it the site that's very utilitarian, very functional, very booking oriented. And when they're on desktop, we're going to publish all that fantastic, rich content that they need. It's detected on the server, so it knows what device is requesting it, and it only sends the site that's relevant for that device, which means you don't have a huge desktop site trying to download to your smartphone. It's probably the highest level of capability required to design and develop that in terms of sophistication of what you need. And you probably have the highest level of sort of testing complexity as well. So you really need to know what you're getting into. And to come back to mobile first, to cap that off, why do you need to be mobile first? Well, like I said, it's a cleansing process. It forces your business to say what is important, what is the primary user journey, what is the primary use case you're trying to support. On a mobile, you have such a small sense of real estate that everything else you move off canvas, or you move it all together from the smartphone screen. It forces you to embrace the natural constraints of mobile. Very difficult input. So if you can remove or change how people manually enter things using automated processes or using the scan function or using voice, things like that, you should do that. And you need to identify, how users want to act on very, very small devices, where you put the call to actions. And if you approach your site design mobile first and you do it in a responsive way, then you're really looking at optimizing speed and image sizes and things like that as well. And you can progressively enhance as you move up device sizes, move to tablet, move to desktop. And that's why, it's kind of like cooking. It's very easy to add salt to your food. It's very hard to take it away once it's in it, which is why mobile first is a really good process to go through. And the material design. So that's kind of UX and design approach. Google, we have a product called material design. And material design it's our approach to trying to unify user interfaces and the elements that user interfaces use and their look and feel. How we pitch it is it's a single underlying design system that organizes interactions in space. Each device reflects a different view of the same underlying system. And it's how you unify the user interface across device types, across screen sizes, and across sites and apps. So if you have multiple native apps, if you have sites, then you can unify them using material design. It's adaptive, has a very strong aesthetic, it has meaningful motion. So motion is very important in material design. And animations are quite important. You see this more in native apps as well. So animation and motion gives the user visual feedback from what they've done. So if they take an action, you can reflect that in visual feedback. It can show you what you need to do next, and it can reveal hidden functions as well. So using animation and motion is quite important, and material design uses it quite heavily. Here's an example of material design. So all of the Google products, both sites and apps, use material design. And Google Trends is a site you can go to check that out. Nordstrom, a big US retailer. This is their Android app. Again, they've taken the material design approach as well. And material design Google designed, or Google created, to address one of the major problems that we had as a business, which is we had hundreds of consumer apps and business apps. They all looked, they all behaved differently. So the challenge that we had was that we'd like someone to use one of our apps or one of our sites, and intuitively understand how the rest operate. So we built it for ourselves first to unify our experiences, and now we're offering it to the market. So site design summary. So the context is we have massive fragmentation and complexity, and that is only going to increase. So what we think is a UX solution, in terms of a systematic way of addressing these complexities, is to go responsive. And if you have quite sophisticated and mature capabilities, you could consider adaptive. Our user interface solution is material design and be mobile first to ensure the smartphone is your baseline experience. We talked earlier in the day in terms of insights about where most of your consumers start your journey. It's in mobile. Make that your baseline experience and enhance from there. Right, examples of good mobile site UX usability. So quite often I'm asked by some of our big brands, can I tell them which mobile sites or which sites I think are fantastic? And I know if I give them examples, they just go away and think, can I copy this? Which would be completely the wrong thing to do, because everything I talk about you have to apply to your own contexts, because these are considerations, which are things to think about. So what I give them are good examples of specific functionality, specific usability elements. So reasons to buy. It's amazing how few companies, even established brands, use reasons to buy, which is amazing when you think about it. Almost like they don't feel the need to tell consumers why they should shop with them and not somebody else. So this is a retail brand called Nixon. At the top of their site, they said delivered by 12/24 and free. So that's a reason to shop with them and not somebody else. It's their delivery proof point. It's their promise. Another one is PC World. So they're telling you they've got over 450 stores nationwide. So they're giving you reassurance that you can do the research online and you can go and buy in store. They offer flexible payment options and peace of mind with 21-day returns policy. So they're giving the customer reassurance. Now, reasons to believe, reasons to buy, what your unique selling points are, get more important with the less established your brand actually is. Or get more importance with how commoditized your sector is, which is what a lot of our clients find themselves in. And then John Lewis, Free UK delivery, click and collect free, returns are free. Again, they're reassuring the customer, whether you're a new customer or a returning customer, why they should shop with you. Menus. So short list or long list with label sections. Again, the retail brand Zadie. So we either say if you've got a menu, make it 7 or less in terms of the number of options. So there isn't too much cognitive overhead on the user to choose. Or you can have a longer menu, but you segment it clearly. So it's logical for the user to go through. Now, some retail brands like Zalando have a very short menu list of like 6 or 7. And then brands that compete with like ASOS have a huge menu with all their categories. Doesn't matter which way you go, as long as it's intuitive to the user. And then keeping content off screen. So this comes back to why you should be mobile first, which is if it's not primary functionality or content, move it off screen. Put it in the hamburger menu. Keep it off screen, off canvas. As long as users know it's there, then they'll call for it. And then secondary call to actions. So this is a UK telecoms company called 3. Now, the 3 main call to actions with a telecoms operator, a mobile operator, are coverage. Can I get coverage in my area? So if you want 4G, but you can't get 4G in your city, you're not going to buy with them. So coverage checker is one of the key user questions that somebody has. Click to call, buy from us. So in terms of click to call, the use case normally is that if you've got a product that's either very expensive, like telephony, where you're going to sign up to a 12 or 20-month contract, or you've got a product that's complex to buy, like health insurance, then you want to push people sometimes over to telephony. Because people selling to people, you'll get the best conversion rate of any touch point. And search. So if a user knows exactly what they're looking for, make search really, really easy. Obviously, search users convert 2 or 3 times more than non-search users. So your search needs to be extremely prominent and easy to use. Search, autocomplete, and display categories. So on the left-hand side, we've got Kelku. On the right-hand side, you've got eBay. And I think I'll show you this one. Can I go to the demo, please? So in eBay, if you go to the search fields and you type in something, they use autocomplete. So autocomplete for the user is ultimate convenience because we're suggesting what they want. But it's surprising how few companies actually use autocomplete. Now, the second bit of value that eBay provide is they give you the categories. So it says jewelry in costume jewelry, jewelry and fine jewelry. So if you think about some of it, if you're an e-commerce retailer, you think in some of your products would probably be multiple categories. You're searching for little back dress, it'll be in women's clothes, dresses, it could be in sales, seasons, clearance. So it's really important to have autocomplete to provide the user with convenience, and also just to prevent them from entering incorrect keys to search for the wrong thing, and provide and categorize the results as well if you can. So again, to allow them to get to the specific result they're looking for as fast as possible. Okay. Mobile to store and click to call, sorry. So these are secondary call to actions. So I think earlier in the day we talked about cross-device behaviors, and how important it was to enable people to use other types of call to actions. So again, if you've got a product that's either expensive to buy or complex to purchase, click to call is a perfect call to action. And it should be the more prominent on your site depending on the price and complexity of the product you're servicing. And mobile to store. If you think about the immediacy that people search for goods on mobile and then expect to purchase them or expect to be driven to store to collect them there and then, it's quite high. And here's 2 examples. One is John Lewis. So on the homepage, they offer a shops, which is basically a store locator. Again, 3, the telco, they say find your nearest store. And they offer click to call that's also extremely prominent. So 3, the telco, the 3 call to actions: check your coverage, click to call, and find your nearest store, or buy now. There's no ambiguity at all with 3. Infinite list. So this is an interesting one for companies that have a lot of inventory. So we go to the demo. So Tesco's, if you're on a product page, product list page or category page, you can see the little icon that allows you to go back to the top, which is that little square. Click that, you go back to the top. So one of the principles in mobile UX is that you never provide dead ends to users. So when you scroll down a list of inventory, and sometimes it could be 20 or 30 pages long of inventory, you never provide dead ends. So if you get to the last inventory item, you either say back to the top, or you repeat the search field and say search again, or you give them different ways to search. Maybe you've done the manual search, maybe you'd like to have a discovery user journey instead, more inspirational user journey. But back to the top, if you're using an infinite list, so Tesco using an infinite list, which is the inventory never actually stops, it's not paginated, it just keeps going and going and going, which is ideal for people that want to discover items rather than searching for something specific, allow them to get back to the top as fast as possible. Sorting products. So on the left-hand side, we've got eBay, the right-hand side, we've got Nixon. Allowing people to sort and filter is really important. And some brands say, well, our customers don't really know what the difference is between sort and filter. They get kind of confused. But the reason you should separate out sort and filter as functions is for the users that do know what the difference is and do use it. Now, sort is just reordering the same stuff on a page, whereas filtering is actually changing the results. And either way, when you get to a page where you're listing the inventory, the categories, it's really important for people to actually reorder that to find what they want quickly. And then helpful content. So this is a brand called AO.com. I don't know if any of you have heard of it. They're currently in the UK and Germany. They're an electricals retailer, but they're a pure play. They only exist online. Now, if we go to the demo, I'll show you AO. They're quite a nice little mobile site as far as retailers or electrical retailers go. Excuse me a second. If you go to the demo, there you go. So this is AO.com. And if you go to if you just scroll down the home page, they have the reasons to buy with them, the reasons to believe. You say they have price match promise, we'll collect you, we'll recycle, pay on finance, 14-day returns. So again, it's quite a new brand, and they're entering new markets. So they really need to substantiate why you should buy with them. And they do that very clearly. And on most pages, they have the reasons to buy, which is great. If you go into their products, you'll see that the customer reviews, the star ratings, are really, really prominent. Again, to reassure you that this is a good product. And people follow and look at the customer reviews quite heavily. And they can go in and read what they actually mean. So again, if you're buying products that are quite expensive or need the level of reassurance, or you need that level of information from people before making that purchase, customer reviews are gold dust. It's sometimes quite difficult to incentivize your user base to actually start doing them, but once you do it, you get the network effect. And wish list at the product level. So normally we see wish lists and favorites as ways to enable people to shop cross-device, which is very important. So if you think about people starting the research journey or consideration journey on smartphones, and then they carry on a different device where they actually convert to do the transaction later on, and it could be on tablet or desktop, or even back on our smartphones. So cross-device, we see it as a new user behavior, and it's something that we need to satisfy in the best way we can. And we see two examples here. On the left, we've got AO.com that I've just showed you. On the right-hand side, we've got Amazon. And the two methods they use, Amazon, they have add to wish list. It doesn't really matter if it's add to wish list, add to favorites, save this item. It's the same function. It's allowing you to save the item you're looking at so you can come back to it later, either on the same device or a different device. Now, there's a whole range of motivations why people shop cross-device. And a lot of them, they've got no intention of converting in that session. They're just not going to convert. Doesn't matter what you offer them. And that's because they could be waiting for payday at the end of the month before they convert. It could be because they want to add multiple items somewhere in your site so they can compare and evaluate before they make a decision. It could be because they're looking to talk to somebody for reassurance or for a second opinion. So there's loads of reasons why people will not convert in session. And that's why these features like wish lists and favorites are so, so important. On the left-hand side, you say AO.com. They simply have an email product option. I mean, for my liking, it's not prominent enough. It should be, it should be pretty obvious that you've got two call to actions. It's add to basket, or it's save for later. But email product, which is simply that you're going to email yourself the URL for that page you're on for that product. That's the easiest way to enable cross-device shopping. You just email yourself your URL, and then wherever device you're on later on, you click on the URL, and you carry on shopping. It's the easiest way to do it. And then wishlist at the category level. So we see some smart retailers, not many, actually saying, you know what, we can actually bring up the favorites or cross-device shopping features up a level from the product detail page up into the category level. So this is ASOS. So they have their hearts at the category level or product listings level. So instead of going into the product detail page each time you like an item, you can go through it pretty quickly. You can add these favorites. So it's really convenient for the end user. And they're making use of this cross-device shopping feature, which is good for the brand because it's stickiness. And if you get a chance, look at the ASOS mobile site. It's a pretty good example of a polished mobile site for e-commerce retailers. Call to actions. So left-hand side, we've got Amazon. Right-hand side, we've got eBay. So the thing with call to actions is they need to be prominent. There used to be a kind of fixation on they had to be above the fold. They don't have to be above the fold because everybody scrolls, and people in mobile expect to scroll. So as long as the call to action is where people expect it to be when they intend to take action, whether it's top of the page, middle page, bottom of the page, doesn't matter. As long as it's where they expect it to be, then they can act on it. But the most important thing is that your primary call to action, which is add to basket, that's what you want to push most. Your secondary call to action is add to wish list or add to favorites so they can continue later. Those two call to actions need to be in proximity to each other because it's one decision somebody's making. So you put the buttons on top or to the side like they have here. Lots of sites separate them, almost thinking, well, we'll put add to favorites down the page because I don't really want people to do that. But it's just one decision people are making. So make sure they're in proximity. And then ASOS again. So this is something I thought only their mobile app did, seeing as mobile apps obviously give you a much richer functional experience. But their mobile site does as well. And this is when you're in the basket and you've added your items, normally a basket allows you to change the quantity of items, +1, -1. But ASOS actually allows you to change other attributes of the item. So they allow you to change the size and the color of an item. Now, the fantastic thing about this is it stops users going back into the purchase funnel. It keeps them in the quarantined environment of the basket, which is where you want them, so they can continue from there into checkout. You don't want them going in and out of the purchase cycle. Again, very few companies do this, but it's quite clever. And then related products. So obviously related products, this is how you increase the average basket value. So you're looking at a product, and then you have related products below it. You normally see that on a product detail page, but actually the last chance you have to do that is when you're in the basket. When you're in the basket, that's your last chance to increase average basket value. Now, the one thing you don't want to do at that point is to throw doubt into the customer's mind that they've chosen the wrong product. So what you show them as related has to be specifically related to the item in the basket. So if brown trousers, brown belt, it's got to be really, really contextual. But it's the last chance you have of average basket value. Right, so those are just some examples of pieces of usability and UX that you can think about. So now we're going to talk about the web trajectory. And I'm going to contextualize this by talking about apps as well. So the utility of the web has always been about reach, because the browser is a neutral platform, nobody owns it, and you just need a URL, and you can access any site, any page in the world, and it's all indexable and searchable. So it's a democratized platform. And there we have the great Tim Berners-Lee, and the browser was always the dominant model on desktop devices. But it's been much harder for the web to adopt to mobile because the browser on the smartphone is quite often the worst app you have on it because it's come as a model into the smartphone, which is why apps have always dominated, because apps are the dominant interaction model on smartphones, not browsers. Then we have native apps. So the web utility was always about reach. You know, the utility of native apps has always been about features. You know, you always have a signed-in experience, so they give you the greatest level of personalization and persistence. They give you the ultimate convenience. You know, you can touch to sign in, you can touch to pay, you can scan things. You have access to all the sensors on a smartphone with a native app that you don't have with sites. It gives you optimum performance. Because it's native code written on top of a native platform, you get the best performance in terms of responsiveness and speed, the richness of the user interface. And you access all the latest sensors and the latest services that Apple offer, that Google offer. So you go with apps for features, you go with web for reach. So how that's changing. So the web is a trajectory as well. And the web trajectory for Google is that we want people to build web apps. You know, we kind of think, you know, customers that have websites, they don't really have a use case that necessitates they build separate native apps. An app for Android, an app for iOS. And we think, you know, why can't sites become more app-like? So we have a product called Polymer. We're not really talking to customers about it yet, other than through our developer relations teams. So they're talking to developers who work for startups, who are quite sophisticated. They're talking about Polymer to those guys. But it's on the web. You can go to Google, you go to our developer resources, and you'll find Polymer. And Polymer is our tool for making sites app-like. So how does it do that? Well, it can make your site work offline. And that's massive. You know, you won't lose, you know, some of the conversions you get when you lose signals. You can have push notifications to your browser, just like you can with native apps. And you can do things like add to home screen. So it's always amazed me how difficult it is to be able to add a site to your home screen so it looks like a native app. So you've got quick access to it. But with Polymer, we have lots and lots of these elements that you just drop into your site. They're just HTML elements. You drag and drop them. It's that easy. Who's using it? Well, we have sophisticated clients like Financial Times using it because they have an amazing mobile site, because they chose to go web, not native. The Guardian. Facebook have just implemented push notifications. So we have some quite savvy brands that are starting to use Polymer now. And they're making their sites work like apps. So native apps, they also have a trajectory. So whereas we always went with apps for features and functionality, well, they're starting to open up and increase their reach. And they're doing that with things like deep linking, and we can index them. So apps are opening up, getting more web-like. The web is increasing in functionality because we can make them work offline, push notifications. So they're kind of coming closer together. But if your business doesn't have a use case where you need native apps, then you should think about looking at things like Polymer to make them more app-like, to develop richer and engaging sites. So here's a quick comparison of a website versus a web app. So if you look at some of the functionalities that a website doesn't offer, it offers geolocation, which you'd expect. It's kind of, you know, central to mobility, but they don't work offline. They don't have push notifications. You can't access some of the sensors like cameras. There's no authentication or payments. So, you know, websites are pretty limited on mobile. But you look at web app, if you build one with something like Polymer, and they support lots of things like push notifications, you can access the cameras, and payments, authentication, all those things we're building now, so they're coming soon. So we're really going to make sites richer and more app-like. And here are some of the basic elements. So for people who already have sites, you can add Polymer elements to your existing site. You don't have to build anything new. You just add them, because it's just HTML. So you can do things like optimizing your form entry. You can have things like autocomplete, and you can integrate themes if you use material design and you want them to look, you want the user interface to look a certain way. Now you can add Polymer to your existing sites, and they don't become more app-like, but it certainly improves the user experience with things like autocomplete. But then we have things that do make them more app-like, like working offline. So if you lose your connection, then you should have designed it so the content is still available, just like your mobile app. Push notifications, those will come through just like normal notifications through your handsets, whether it's Android or iOS that you're using. And install banners. So if you're on a site, and if you've been to that site 2 or 3 times before, then you'll get a request at the bottom, do you want to add that site to your home screen? And it'll use logic. It'll say, you're just not going to pop up all the time. It'll come up if you've been to that site 2 or 3 times on the assumption that you've been here regularly. Maybe you'll want to add it to your home screen. Google Photos is one of our latest web apps. It was built using Polymer. It's a responsive site, and it was built mobile first. So this is the stuff that we're doing ourselves as a business. So to summarize, we need to become customer obsessed to understand the needs and the pain points customers have and the enjoyable moments to take commercial opportunities. We need to understand the different design options you have with sites to improve conversions, and we need to understand where web and app are going next so we can think about what that means to our products and how we take advantage of that. And that's all I have. Thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Please, questions. Somebody has to ask a question so I can have an excuse for throwing this into the audience. No questions? Yay! Hold on, I'm going to throw you this, okay? I hope everyone's insured. You ready? Good catch.
So my question is, what would you recommend for media companies? You had an example about BBC website.
Yep.
So adaptive or responsive, what would you recommend for?
Well, they're a content publisher. I mean, they're a content publisher, so they don't have very sophisticated functionality to cater for. They don't have a difficult kind of like purchase and checkout flow. So responsive for them was, I think, fairly straightforward. They would only go to adaptive if their users have a very different use case when they're using a smartphone versus using a desktop. And I think their use case is probably fairly similar. When I was working in car hire, it was very different because the smartphone they were using just for booking, so it was just a booking flow, whereas on the desktop site, they had all the destination content and car content. So we had 2 very, very different use cases, which is where adaptive really, you get the advantage. You have to throw it. Oh, yeah, there's a mic in there. That's it. Talking to the Android.
You talked about the complexity about in terms of devices and platforms.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have to show content to the users. What are the major differences between content showing on different devices? I mean, like smartphone is more on the go, while a tablet is more laid-back device.
So there's some
any major differences?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't cater to the tablet unless you have a use case again that's specific for a tablet. So if, I keep coming back to car hire, but there was such a specific use case where on a larger device, when people are sat down, either in front of a desktop or leaning back with a tablet at home, then they wanted to spend the evening being inspired by where they wanted to go. So it's a content-rich experience. With a smartphone, was very functional. The assumption is always that mobile is great for snacking, for doing things in between, snatching time. But that's a fallacy. Because if in the UK, Ofcom, which is our telecoms regulator, which is completely impartial, the latest report they published was that people use mobiles in all environments. And there's a significant amount of usage, if not the majority, is at home. So people at home, they probably, they got their desktop probably upstairs in a bedroom, whatever. They've got a tablet next to them. They're still choosing to use a smartphone. So you've got to think about mobiles are being used in every context. So when we think about what the base case is for our proposition, it's smartphone, because it's used everywhere, in all contexts and all use cases. It's actually the desktop that's the kind of the alternative use case, because it's only used when you're sat down in front of it at work or at home. So we need to think about things a little bit differently, I think, and get rid of the assumption that mobiles are just used to snatch content. That's not the case.
I'll try and not be too specific with the question because it is quite specific to me and my company. But in kind of your experience, have you seen any examples, or do you have any opinions on how best to tackle kind of long-form user-generated content in a multi-device world, particularly thinking it's particularly difficult to write on a mobile?
So not consuming, you mean creating?
Creating, yeah.
Oh, wow. I don't know. If I think about what you try to get people to do on mobile, to make it, to make the difficulty invisible to them, is, if I think about the apps example, is to use the sensors on the smartphone. So, you know, if you think about how people create and consume content, it's visual on apps a lot of the time. You know, it's either through, you know, video messaging, image messaging. We see people more and more using the scan barcodes in shops to look at product information. We see them shopping using product photography, either taking a photograph of somebody wearing certain clothes and saying match that. So we see people, you know, or you know, you identify records and sounds through things like Shazam, which is audio, using the microphone. So we always try to think about how we substitute manual entry of content and automate it using the sensors of the smartphone. But if you're writing something, I think, you know, what's the appropriate device to use? It's probably not a smartphone.
Okay.
You've got to throw it.
It would be bad, wouldn't it?
Good team effort.
Again, I'll try and not make it too specific, but have you got any advice for handling customizable products? Because on a desktop that's quite easy because you usually need a big image and things like that, but obviously you don't have that space on a mobile.
Ask the question a different way.
Sorry. Have you got any advice for handling products you can customize, like cards, things like that, really? Because it's very difficult on a mobile to do something like that.
I mean, make data entry as easy as possible. So if you can use the scan function, use that. If it is data entry, use big keyboards. You know, maybe you need to offer a customizable keyboard. Maybe use emoticons. You know, things like that. We see other brands coming out with their own keyboards, like Coke, people like that. And we see people more and more using messaging services using emoticons, which is a weird phenomenon when you're my age, but. Any more questions? At the back, come on, at the back. You shy guys at the back. No? Yay, another one.
Is it working?
That's it. Yeah, we can hear you.
Just a short question about search ranking. You discussed the choice between a mobile-specific site, a responsive site, or an adaptive site.
Yep.
Which one works best for organic search rankings?
Organic search rankings.
Yeah.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
Okay. I've heard the discussions that Google prefers responsive sites, but
I don't know why. I don't know why our algorithm, which is a black box, would have any preference. I mean, the only time we ever kind of we try to shift behavior in terms of the products, you know, brands offer customers, is to improve the customer experience for users. So we say we should go responsive as a generalization to deal with all the complexities you have across devices and screen sizes. You know, but if you're very sophisticated, we're happy for you to go adaptive. But if you have a great mobile site, like eBay or ASOS, that's fine as well. So I don't know why we wouldn't have a preference.
all right.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you.